Alright, crypto surfers, this is Z, you're watching Cryptide, and today I would like to show you the biggest prediction that I have ever made. You might have heard of this as the cashioning. Over at Cryptide, we call it the flippening. I like to think of it as the perfect storm between mining power, market dynamics, fueled by manipulation. This is when Bitcoin Cash flips to be worth more than Bitcoin. Before getting started, I just want to mention that this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is simply my opinion. I'm just a person who really likes charts, really likes predicting price action and trading, but these are your decisions, and please don't make any decisions without doing your own research first. Okay, this is only my opinion. I'd also like to recommend that you check out the previous videos. They provide some background information on charting itself and how to set up the chart in this way, what this chart setup sort of means, but most importantly, there's a video on Fibonacci retracements, and that goes over how to place Fibonacci retracements in general using this chart setup, but specifically, it explains how I arrived at this retracement here. And that's important because this Fibonacci here, this dictates the rest of the entire chart. This is the basis of the chart, the building block of this prediction, and I'm very grateful that I'm so confident in this Fibonacci retracement because everything rests on it. And in the previous video, I'll actually explain how I arrived at that retracement. By checking that out, you'll be able to be a little bit more confident in it too, and understand why I've arrived at the targets and exit points that I have. So the first thing I would like to dive into is mining power. So this is one of the two factors that will be interacting. Mining power will feed back in an interactive exchange between market dynamics and itself, mining power. So as one shifts, the other will shift and will shift further in the same direction. So this will be a feedback loop fueled by manipulation. And manipulation has already happened to set up this entire chart. So it's not just that people will be buying more to make the price go up, it's that it has been formed to this very specific structure so that this very specific event can happen. It's very exciting. Okay, so let's first have a look at the mining aspect of this feedback relationship. We're over at fork.lol, and this is actually a really good site to get a broad picture of the mining interaction between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So the main thing is that miners will switch between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash depending on which is more profitable for them to mine. The profitability of the chain to mine is dependent on how much USD value the coin is worth and how much coin they can get for the same amount of work. Now that changes depending on how the difficulty is adjusted. So over here you can see the difficulty of Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. So Bitcoin in yellow or orange and Bitcoin Cash in blue. Bitcoin goes up in these stages, and these jump periods, these like stage intervals, represent the difficulty adjustment point. And so this is when enough blocks have been mined to constitute a difficulty adjustment. And the adjustment is made based upon the average time it took to mine all of these blocks. So as more mining power is contributed to the Bitcoin network, so more people are jumping on to try and find a block, to mine a Bitcoin block, then it becomes easier and easier, or faster and faster, I should say, to actually find a block because more people are looking. So as a result, in order to keep the speed of block finding the same to about a constant 10 minutes per block, the difficulty has to be raised. So more people looking, faster blocks being found, then to balance that out, the blocks become harder to be found because there are so many people looking. Conversely, if people ditch the network and they stop mining, then it becomes harder and harder. At the same difficulty, it becomes harder and harder for the fewer and fewer people to find a block because there are less people looking. Now, while Bitcoin requires a set number of blocks to be found before changing its difficulty or adjusting its difficulty, Bitcoin Cash is able to adjust its difficulty really quickly and really adaptively depending on how many miners are jumping on and off. So even if the network is swamped by new miners, the difficulty will be adjusted up rapidly enough to keep the number of blocks being found at around a constant interval over time. Conversely, as miners jump off the Bitcoin Cash network, it will become easier and easier to find blocks so then that time stays the same. That is the primary difference that will cause this huge market flux. Okay, and I'm about to explain why. So this graph here, also on fork.lol, is the time until the next difficulty retarget. So this is when enough blocks have been found to increase or decrease the difficulty depending on the average time it took to find a block during that previous time period. So there's this big window here where the difficulty is set. It takes around 12 days on average until the difficulty is readjusted once enough blocks has been found. But the important thing to note there is that this is a period of time that it takes to find blocks. So it's the number of blocks that needs to be found that defines this period. That means that if for whatever reason all these miners just suddenly ditched the network and they just left, they packed up their bags or just turned off their mining rigs, if there was a blackout throughout the world, and no, not throughout the world, but if there was this huge drought of miners, then the same number of blocks would still need to be found before the difficulty was adjusted, but there would be no one looking for them. There would be hardly anyone looking, and so this period would take a long time, and the difficulty would be way too high for the number of miners on the chain. This means that it would take a long time to find each block, and it would be really expensive in terms of transaction fee to find these blocks. This is what is going to happen, theoretically, during the flippening. So the next question is, how is that going to happen? The answer is market dynamics. As Bitcoin Cash becomes more valuable in relation to Bitcoin, then more and more miners will jump onto the Bitcoin Cash network. Now, the network for Bitcoin Cash will be constantly adjusting its difficulty to be harder and harder to compensate for this, but if the price keeps climbing on Bitcoin Cash and dropping for Bitcoin, then the process will speed up. More and more miners will jump, and as a result, the network will get slower and slower and more expensive for Bitcoin, causing the price to shift more and causing, again, the miners to jump more. So price shifts, miners jump, and then the miners jumping causes price to shift. So that is how the feedback relationship between mining power and market dynamics is formed. And that will be fueled by manipulation. Manipulation not only on the side of price, buying to get prices up, or at least wash trading to get prices up on the Bitcoin Cash side, but also mining by getting the miners to jump chain even if the incentive of mining reward isn't there. So by manipulating both the mining and the market dynamics and forming this feedback relationship between the two, you have this perfect storm. And that perfect storm is going to brew the perfect wave that we are going to surf all the way to the top. Okay, so that's the fundamental side. As I think I mentioned, if you'd like a little bit more detail about anything to do with the mining power or the back end, I suggest you jump over to the Cryptide Discord, link in the description below. Ask the Big One or Pat Ziggy. They know all about this. They are experts in this field and they will answer your questions. We also have some links on there with some good content.